comes to pharmaconutrition, but also former chair of the Forum on Food and Health for UK and senior scientific advisor to the UK government's committee on the safety of medicine. He's currently a fellow of the Institute of Food, Brain and Behavior at Oxford University. Boom! Team. We're not talking a local little doctor. We're talking Dr. Paul Clayton. Take it on, my friend. Thanks for taking your time.
Good morning, Marco. I'm calling you from the United States today. And I thought I'd talk to you today about a little bit about balance, about inflammation, but mostly extend, because extend is really, it's the forgotten child in a way. People don't take it particularly seriously, not compared to balanced soil and xenobiotic, but there's a lot to it. People sometimes say it's like a vitamin and mineral pill, but it's not. It's much more than that. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, if I can just get the screen to behave and show you how it all fits together. So let me see if we can find a way of sharing the screen. And at this point,
you see there? Share screen?
Mm-hmm. You should have my screen now.
Not yet. I think you have to press first share screen, and then it pops up.
That's what I've been doing.
Okay.
And maybe this.
There it is. There it is. Now we see your laptop background.
Okay. So now, do you see Zinzino portfolio?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, let me quickly jump into this and say that our products are a complete waste of time, waste of money. I wouldn't take them. Well, you wouldn't need to take them if everybody ate a reasonable diet. But the problem is we don't anymore. We've been captured. We are products ourselves. We're products of a modern corporatist system, which basically owns all the information about us. They know who we are. They know what we like to buy. And because of the way in which they test foods today, they're very capable of using very sneaky technology to make us almost dependent, addicted, if you like, to the ultra-processed foods that are filling our shops and which take up an increasing amount of our overall calorific intake. Very hard for us to resist. These foods are designed to be addictive, but it's become very obvious that they are also designed to make you sick. And they do so by doing two things. Firstly, they have hardly any nutritional value at all, so you end up with dysnutrition and dysbiosis, major problems right away. But these foods are also associated with an increased risk of weight gain, diabetes, cancer, early death, many other problems, because they create chronic inflammation in the body. And they do so in different ways. They take away the omega-3s, the long-chain omega-3s, which are the ones that we need, because they are the most important anti-inflammatory nutrients that there are, together with polyphenols. These act together, and guess what? The polyphenols have been taken out of these ultra-processed foods as well. Now, these food companies, and there's only a small number of them that really dominate the global marketplace, go one further. Then they take away the prebiotic fibers. These ultra-processed foods hardly contain any at all. So, along with chronic inflammation in most tissues in the body, this means that you have dysbiosis in the gut. You now have chronic inflammation in your intestines as well. Then they take one other compound away, and these are the 1,3,1,6 beta-glucans, and those are essential nutrients, micronutrients, which you need in order for your innate immune system to work properly. And if your innate immune system is not working properly, you will have more low-level grumbling infections, which means more chronic inflammation. So 4 very, very important anti-inflammatory compounds have been removed from the diet, and in their place, the food industry puts in these toxins. They're advanced glycation and advanced lipoxidation end products. They also add a lot of LPS, or lipopolysaccharides. I won't go into why they do this. It's sort of half accidental, half deliberate, but these are all very pro-inflammatory compounds. So the top 4 anti-inflammatory compounds have gone. Here are 2 or 3 new pro-inflammatory compounds, and then just to make things much, much worse, they stuff our foods full of sugar, which causes more chronic inflammation. So if you eat this diet, it's guaranteed to make you sick. It is guaranteed to make you fat, diabetic, at risk of heart disease, cancer, dementia, Now, I think you can begin to see why these very serious healthcare issues, what we call diseases of civilization, have spiraled, particularly since 1950, to the point where our healthcare systems are staggering under the burden. And this, my friends, is why today we do need properly designed pharmaconutritional formulations to undo the damage that this kind of diet is doing to us. As I said, none of our products would be necessary if the food companies acted responsibly and sold us foods that were actually pro-health, but they don't. They are killing us in these ways, and that is why we are necessary. We are the antidote. And this is a brief diagram to show where our products work and why they are necessary, because this is a diagram of inflammation. I won't go through all of this, but I'm going to look at the inflammation section right at the bottom. This is what we call the inflammasome, and this is where the actives that we use have a role to play. Now, right up there in the top left, that little lightning bolt, that is an inflammatory challenge. We need to be able to create inflammation under certain circumstances. For example, when we're invaded by a pathogen or you have physical tissue damage, inflammation is necessary because that's how we defend ourselves against these injuries. You have two sets of fatty acids, the omega-6s on the left, that's the arachidonic acid, and over on the right, EPA, DHA, which, as you know, are the omega-3 long-chain polyunsaturated fatty acids. You need arachidonic acid because that starts the inflammation, and then when you've had enough of that, along come the omega-3 compounds, and they stop the inflammation. So it's like the accelerator and the brake on the car. And if you're driving in heavy traffic, and being alive, being surrounded by insults and responding to them is like driving in heavy, heavy traffic. You need all the time to be able to switch the inflammation on and switch it off, on and off. That's the process of being alive. But you need to have those things in the right proportion. And the problem is we have far too much 6s and not enough 3s, and that is important because it plays a role at the top of the inflammatory cascade. If you have too many 6s and not enough 3s, the cell starts shedding little particles called exosomes. This is the way in which cells communicate with each other, both locally and sometimes in other parts of the body. Sometimes we are beginning to see even in other people. These exosomes are being shed all the time. And if you have a very high 6-to-3 ratio, those exosomes will contain high levels of matrix metalloproteases, which are very, very destructive. These enzymes dissolve all your tissues, turn you into, basically, they stop the cells from communicating with each other, from coordinating with each other, from adhering to each other. And so a tissue will basically break down. It will liquefy. But because these enzymes are so very destructive, we evolved to eat a diet which, if we're eating a natural or anything like a healthy diet, which contains large amounts of polyphenols. These polyphenols block those enzymes, tone them down, and make it possible for us to have the right levels of inflammation. But here's the problem. The multinational food companies have given us a diet with a very, very high 6-to-3 ratio, so the top phase of this sequence is running hot. And then they take away the polyphenols as well. And so the second phase is also overheating, which means that we're constantly leaching too many of these very straight destructive enzymes into the tissues, leading to their gradual destruction. Because what these matrix metalloprotease enzymes do is they break down the extracellular matrix mesh of microfibers that holds all our cells together. And these enzymes are, quite well known. They are the same enzymes that are released by flesh-eating bacteria. They dissolve you. They dissolve everything. And it is these same enzymes that are being released in much smaller quantities over much longer periods of time that lead to the slow breakdown of bone that we call osteoporosis, the slow destruction of cartilage we call osteoarthritis. It is happening in the blood vessels. It leads to hypertension, coronary artery disease, vascular veins, hemorrhoids, stroke. If it happens in the brain, it's deeply involved in neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's and Parkinsonism. In other tissues, chronic inflammation is essential for angiogenesis, tumorigenesis, and metastasis. So it's deeply involved in this tidal wave of cancer that has now become 10 times more common than it was a mere century ago. This same release of enzymes is in the skin what leads to the thinning and wrinkling of skin that we think of as skin aging. In fact, in general, chronic inflammation is thought to drive a very large part of the phenomenology, the appearance, the symptoms, and the problems associated with aging, which is why we now refer to this process as inflammaging. And if you could reduce chronic inflammation, you would slow the entire aging process. But we don't. Because of the way we eat, because of the way we live, chronic inflammation is absolutely universal now. And that is why when you measure the way in which we age, it has been shown that we're aging about 10 to 15 years more rapidly than our parents and our grandparents were. So we are older at the age of 50 or 60 than our parents and grandparents were at that same age. I don't really want to be in the business of selling our formulations to everyone. Not everybody needs them. So I think, first of all, you should test. The balance test is a way of telling you whether you have not just the right 6-to-3 ratio, but it's actually a marker for good nutritional profiling in general. So if someone comes back to you with a really good test, they probably have pretty good nutrition, and they probably won't need everything that we have to offer. But if they have a bad result, you know the way to go, and you know what the benefits of balance are. But that does not enough to remedy the problem of dysnutrition, which is the other issue, the other major problem that is caused by the ultra-processed food diet. So this is all the things we would like people to eat, except that they don't, very few of them. And what we could do is put all of that nutrition and put it into one tablet that you wouldn't be able to swallow it. So we put it into a group of 4 tablets. That's about the least we can get away with at the moment. And this is about getting the repair kit into place. So we can stop the inflammation, the breakdown of tissues with balance oil. But when you want to start to consider rebuilding, regenerating, healing, rebuilding new healthy tissue, that is where all these cofactors come in and play a role. So this is designed to replace all of the missing micro and phytonutrients that are no longer there in the ultra-processed diet, step number 2. But step number 3, you also need those beta-glucans and cyanogens, because that is what is required to enhance your innate immune system. So all of this is built into Extend. And it starts with what looks like a vitamin and mineral tablet. So vitamin C, B1, B2, niacin, panthenate, all the usual things are there, and at doses that have been very carefully calculated. We are assuming that you're eating today's ultra-processed diet, which contains recognized levels of all of these different micronutrients. And what we have done is to add to that. We've topped you up in each one of these categories to bring you up to the levels of these micronutrients that were found in the mid-Victorian diet. And just for those of you who don't know, the mid-Victorian diet was associated with incredibly good health and a very, very reduced risk of chronic degenerative disease. So this is ground level. This is the basement of the Extend formulation, all of these vitamins and minerals. And here's another bunch of vitamins and minerals, but we're still on the ground floor. This is still only your foundation. This is what looks like a very, very good vitamin and mineral tablet. Oh, wait, and here's some more. And actually now we're going above and beyond most vitamin and mineral tablets. But as I said, this is only the ground floor. At this point, we add something a bit special. This is vitamin E, but it's not vitamin E as you recognize it. For most people, vitamin E is just D-alpha tocopherol. This is what industry uses, and it's not necessarily the best form of vitamin E at all. There are, in fact, 8 different forms of vitamin E, 4 tocopherols, 4 tocotrienols, and they're all doing slightly different things. All of these 8 compounds have been compared to a symphony orchestra. They play slightly different tunes, and they complement one another. And we know that some of these forms of vitamin E are far better at repairing damaged cell membranes than others. Some of these forms of vitamin E are far better at killing off cancer cells than others. So any formulation which only uses D-alpha, which is the synthetic form, you're being shortchanged in a very major way. What we have done, this was technically extremely difficult. We found different sources for all of these different subsets of vitamin E and included all of them, again, at levels that we find in the mid-Victorian or blue zone diet. Now we move up another level to a phytonutrient array where we've put in where we think are significant amounts of all of the different carotenoids and xanthophylls that you would hope to find in a healthy diet, plus a pinch of coenzyme Q10. Some of you might think that the dose of coenzyme Q10 is a little on the low side. There are certainly pills and capsules around which operate in much lower doses than that. But what we have found is that most people are perfectly able to make their own Q10 if they have the right micronutrients. Once you give them everything else, all these other vitamins and minerals, they start to make their own Q10 perfectly adequately. And at that point, you don't need to give them huge amounts. We just put in a little bit there, really for marketing purposes, to be quite honest. I don't think it's having any effect. I don't think that people actually need it. Just for those of you who don't already know all of these phytonutrients, alpha carotene is a very interesting compound, not as well known as its brother, beta carotene, but it has some very interesting chemoprotective effects. Zeaxanthin and lutein, as I'm sure many of you know, are involved in the health of the retina, but they are also now shown to be very important in playing a role as neuroprotectants as well. There's some very interesting data that suggests that they are linked to many other aspects of brain health, and that's one of the other reasons why they're in here. Lycopene, as you probably all know, is derived from tomatoes. You also find this red pigment in watermelon and in a very interesting Vietnamese fruit called the hach, which is so full of lycopene that when you pick it, it stains your fingers bright red. We haven't yet found a commercially available source of that, but we're reviewing it at the moment. And lycopene is interesting because, like the other carotenoids and xanthophylls and polyphenols, it is dermally protective. These are compounds that migrate into your skin and actually protect it from ultraviolet and ultraviolet-induced aging. But they also have been shown in a number of different tests to have strong chemoprotective properties. Moving up to the fourth level, now you have a spread of polyphenols. Some of these are water-soluble, some are lipid-soluble. Some of them have EFSA-accredited claims. Others are not that well documented yet, but one thing they do all have in common is they're all anti-inflammatory. Oleuropein and hydroxytyrosol are able to protect against the oxidation of cholesterol in the blood, which is considered to be highly cardioprotective. But what I can tell you, more or less off the record, is that they've also been shown to induce reverse cholesterol transport. What that means is when you eat these compounds, they get into the blood and they stimulate the removal of cholesterol from your artery walls. So this is a way of reversing the buildup of atheroma in arteries, which is part and parcel of coronary artery disease. So this is part of the Mediterranean paradox. It's one of the very interesting compounds in olives that is most clearly protective against a wide range of pathologies. The reason why all the other polyphenols are added is because they're all moving to slightly different parts of the body. It's a shotgun approach, if you like. What we're trying to do is to extend anti-inflammatory protection to different compartments and different components of the body. Moving on up again, and now finally we come to the immune concept. These are the 1,3,1,6 beta-glucans. And these are very interesting molecules. When I chaired the scientific advisory board of Biothera, which was the leading company in this area, we spent hundreds of millions of dollars researching this one compound, and they are the most effective way of improving the cellular components of the innate immune system that has yet been discovered, enabling the immune cells to remove bacteria from the bloodstream more quickly, to reduce infection, to reduce mortality, to improve resistance to infection, and at the same time, to reduce your tendency to have allergic symptoms. A long backstory behind that, which we don't have time for, but all of that is covered in my new book, which is called Supporting the Immune System, which I think has just come out. Sorry about the plug, Marco. And then finally, a little bit of broccoli extract, which contains a substance called rhodonide. And for those of you who aren't necessarily chemists, rhodonide is it's another name for cyanide, and everyone should eat cyanide. Obviously, it's important that you get the dose right. But the point is this: cyanide is certainly toxic if you take too much of it, but very small amounts. The amounts that we put into Extend are essential for the functioning of an enzyme called lactoperoxidase. And this acts in parallel with Wellmune, because where Wellmune is improving the cellular components of the innate immune system, lactoperoxidase, the enzyme, is an essential part of the humoral components, the fluid components, if you like, of the innate immune system. And when you add Wilmune and this broccoli extract, what you're seeing is a huge overall improvement in resistance. You become almost bulletproof. And just as a point of interest, COVID-19 has been floating around for a little bit lately. I have been using Extend and various other things, and I got to the point where I believed that this is a mixture which would reduce my vulnerability to this virus, and in fact, any virus. The reason why we called it Extend was it was designed to protect against something called Disease X, which is a nightmarish vision of the future dreamt up by the WHO of this virus, which appears out of nowhere, probably a zoonotic virus from some unknown animal species, which jumps into the human population and has both high transmission rates and high virulence, a bit like the Andromeda strain. And I thought, what could we do to protect ourselves against Disease X? Hence the formula Extend, which contains all of these things and many more, all of which are known to improve different aspects of the innate immune system. So I thought maybe we could do a clinical trial, but it takes a long time to get ethics committee approval. So I went out and got myself COVID-19, easy to do. Went into crowded situations, didn't wear gloves, didn't wash my hands, got COVID-19. And I can tell you, I've just sailed through it. I'm in an at-risk group. I'm 70 years old, and I really should have had a pretty hard time. But I can tell you, I've had worse hangovers. Well, not for a long time. I had to go back to medical school since I had my last bad hangover. But, you know, for me, this disease was really not particularly serious, and I was able to continue working throughout. Then on the next floor, what we're doing, and this is something we've been talking about for a while, it has been delayed because we've been having problems sourcing this, an extract of Ascophyllum nodosa, which, as many of you know, is not one of those idiotic Harry Potter spells. It's an edible seaweed. And this edible seaweed contains a mixture of fucoidans and fullerenes. For the chemists, polysulfated oligosaccharides. When you eat these, they act as non-stick compounds. They remove the plaque and the tartar from your teeth, but also, if they're in the system, they prevent other pathogens from sticking to heart valves or to prostheses. So it's an additional anti-infective shield, as well as something that'll keep your teeth clean and your breath sweet. What's happening next? Well, we already have candidate compounds for another layer on this multi-level product, which I think are going to blow your socks off once we announce it. But it's time sensitive, there are regulatory issues, and Extend, I think, is going to go from, from strength to strength. So Marco, or Dave, let me hand the baton back to you. Perhaps there's time for one or two questions, but otherwise, the control is back in your hands.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul. I think what you just covered is amazing stuff just there. And we have a tight schedule today, so we won't have time for questions today. Sadly, would be amazing. But thank you for everything you do, Paul, and amazing content. And so if you tell a person to be fully protected in short terms, how would you explain the health protocol? Why should I take the health protocol? Just somebody's new say, okay, so why is health protocol important? If you just...
Okay. The health protocol, very simple. 3 objects, 3 compounds, 3 formulations. The first one, Balance Oil, stops chronic inflammation in almost all of the body's tissues. Secondly, Extend, which gives the body everything that it needs to repair and to regenerate those tissues which have been damaged by chronic inflammation. The third compound is xenobiotic, and what that does, it's food not for you, but for the probiotic species that live in the large bowel. What it does is to rebuild and rebalance the microbiome, and in so doing, to stop chronic inflammation in the intestinal tract as well. When you add all these things together, each one of these formulations works on their own. They have very clear and documented benefits. It's when you add all 3 that you become bulletproof.
Very good. How big difference is it? Because this is a question every now and then, because they have many customers on the Balance on Extend, and they say,
Yeah.
so why would I add, okay, you just answered it, but how important is to add the third component, the xenobiotic, to use the oil and Extend?
I think it's very, very important. What the WHO says, and it's not, I know that there's a bit of a problem with the WHO at the moment, but they have looked at a lot of data, which I trust, and what they show is that if you improve your intake of these particular fibers that are in xenobiotic, you reduce mortality, early death, by up to 30%. This is huge, because if you have dysbiosis, which the modern ultra-processed diet creates, that creates inflammatory stress, not only in the intestines, but it creates problems in many other tissues as well. So I think that the importance of xenobiotic, it can't be overstated. It is as important as the other two. Their significance, I would say, I'd put them all on a par with each other. If people have, for example, aches and pains in joints or inflammatory symptoms elsewhere in the body that they can reduce with balanced oil, that is already telling me that they have a dietary problem in general. The balanced oil will reduce the immediate problem, but if they want to experience additional benefits and further long-term positive impacts on their health, I can tell you, add the other two components as well. The thing about xenobiotic is it works very quickly, and you will notice the benefits, you will notice the impact within the first week.
Very good, very good. Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you very much for taking the time to come and share with the team, and we appreciate you and everything you do for this company.
It's a pleasure, Marco.
Thank you very much. Have a great day over there in Florida.
Thank you. All right, bye for now.
Bye-bye.